Hey, Madeline here. Before we get to the episode, I just wanted to let you know that since this episode was created, Jess and her husband gave baby A an official name, Autumn Ruth. Congrats to the wolves. If you're totally lost, it'll make more sense in a minute. Enjoy the episode.
I can do medical cares. I can change a trach with my eyes closed, but ask me to swaddle a newborn, and I don't know that I could.
Hello, welcome to The Rare Life. I'm your host, Madeline Cheney, and I am thrilled to share with you our first story episode of Season 3 with Jess Wolf, the story of Lily, who was born at 24 weeks after her twin had tragically passed away. But first, it's time for a new question of the month. March's question is, what do you want the world to know about special needs parenting? One more time. What do you want the world to know about special needs parenting? As always, you can answer that on the website, therarelifepodcast.com, or by following me on Instagram at the_rare_life. I usually give you a chance to answer that via my stories. Jess, her husband Pat, and Lily live in the Chicago area of the United States. Lily has a twin whom they call A. 2 years ago, due to health issues, A passed away at 24 weeks gestation, and a few days later, Lily was born. For my infant loss listeners, check out the show notes for a link to a fantastic podcast dedicated to keeping your baby's memories alive. Due to intubation, Lily has damaged lungs, a health issue fairly common among preemies, but rare among infants in general. After the recording, Jess told me that as she was scrolling through Instagram one day with Lily, Lily saw a picture of Kimball and she thought it was her. And now she gets super excited whenever she sees Kimball on her feed, which I think is so cute. We are determined to meet in real life someday. I was so thrilled to chat with Jess. She was so easy to talk to, and we got into the nitty-gritty, which is just so beautiful. That is my goal. In this episode, Jess opens up about a particularly devastating time of Lily's 256-day NICU stay, when they yet again almost lost her. We also chat about the intense guilt we both feel for the betrayal of our bodies to our children. And we talk about how in the end, our love and best efforts is enough. Jess is a lover of television and cooking. Let's jump right in. Hi, Jess. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so happy to have you. So I'm kind of structuring this interview with a present snapshot and then a little sneak into the past, and then we're going to jump into the future just to kind of give you an idea of where we're going with this. So
Sure.
Let's start with the present. I would love a snapshot of Lily and just what she's like and what her medical needs are.
Sure. So Lily has changed, grown, developed considerably in the last couple months. We have seen an unbelievable language boom. We've seen a lot more physical development just in these last couple months. I don't know what happened, but she has words. So she's signed for quite a while, but she's speaking words and putting 2 and sometimes 3 words together, or 2 words and signs together. Really, ever since she started walking, she just developmentally has skyrocketed, which is amazing because we spent so long not knowing developmentally what she would look like and anticipating a really long and arduous developmental journey toward that quote unquote catching up that, people expect preemies to be caught up by 4. And there was no way in the world that my kid was going to be, remotely on par with her peers.
Mm.
But she just kind of has had these big like spurts of development. So she's
Oh,
getting
wow.
into everything, and she's starting to like imaginary play, which has been amazing. Like she loves
Yeah.
dollies and
Oh.
cars, and she loves art, like finger painting and coloring. And yeah, she just has become this toddler in the last
Mm.
couple months just before my eyes, and it's been so much fun.
That is so awesome. I relate so much because it's just those milestones they hit are so much sweeter when you've worked so
Yes.
hard for them and you don't take them for granted. Like these are things you've worked with therapy on, and
Yes.
it's just those milestones are such sweet moments and such triumphs.
For sure. For sure. For forever. Every time we changed her diaper, it was like incredible. And every time we got to pick her up without 6 people helping us was incredible.
Mm.
Like these little inch stones, we call them, like these
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
tiny things that so many other people, like you said, take for granted. But now we're getting to experience some of those typical things, air
Right.
quotes, like that we just never expected. And it's super fun.
Yeah, that is amazing. So earlier you mentioned that when we're kind of off the hook, that
Mhm.
Lily's biggest medical issue, I guess, is her
Mhm.
trach. So along with being trached, what else does she deal with medically?
So, her trach now is just kind of a means to an end for nighttime ventilation. So
Okay.
she's able to breathe on her own during the day,
Oh,
which
awesome.
for a very long time she was ventilated 24/7. And that was partially what held back her physical development, because
Mm,
she wasn't really able to crawl or walk when she was attached to a 6 foot cord.
right.
Um, but she now is off the ventilator throughout the day, and her trach is really there just as a means to ventilate her at night. So
Okay.
as we speak right now, I'm watching her on the monitor, and she's hooked up to her ventilator, and she does require oxygen therapy from time to time. So
Mm,
right now she's on oxygen just because it's been really dry in our house. So that kind of comes and goes. The biggest hurdle developmentally while we were in the NICU, because she was intubated for so long, she never took a bottle or learned how to suck, swallow, and breathe.
okay.
So she does not eat by mouth. And that continues to be our biggest area of difficulty.
Oh.
She does not have any desire
Oh.
to eat at all. So she licks the salt off of pretzels, and they have to be a very specific pretzel. um, yeah, but that's about
Oh,
it.
wow. Yeah, again, I that's like Kimball recently has started to progress with eating, but before he had zero interest in table food. I'm like, why not? It's so
Yes.
yummy. Why won't you try
Yeah.
it?
Yes.
Like, lick it.
Yes.
Oh.
And I am just like over exaggerating how much I love this apple or this chocolate, or, but we joke. We joked 2 years ago, and then we joked again this year. If she's eating by next Halloween, we're going to let her eat every single piece of candy that she gets her hands
Yes,
on.
totally. Oh my gosh, yes. So is she G-tube fed then?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
She's G-tube fed. So I home blend everything for her. So she has tried everything under the sun, and she eats way more healthy than Pat and I do, just
Yeah.
because I can give her amaranth and quinoa and chia and all the things that I would never put in my own body.
Yeah. Well, there's a perk.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I don't have to hold her down to give her medication and, all that
Yeah.
stuff. So I personally, the G-tube is my like secret friend. I
Yeah.
really don't have a problem with the G-tube at all. But yeah, so those are her big kind of medical hurdles. Just, we're waiting for long maturation. Her biggest diagnosis is bronchopulmonary dysplasia, which is just damaged ventilator lungs from when she was so little. So yeah, those are our biggest hurdles. She has some small like secondary diagnoses, but nothing that should impact her long term, other than kind of those big ones.
Okay. Awesome. Well, okay. So I would love to kind of sneak into your past with Lily. Just thinking back about your journey with her and her twin, when you think back about her 2 years of life, there are those moments that stand out either because they're so awesome or because they're so terrible and hellish.
Mm-hmm.
What moment comes to mind? Tell us a story.
Man, I've marked our journey by these kind of defining moments, the pillars of our NICU stay.
Yeah.
I mean, the day that we had found out that her sister had passed was by far the worst day of my life. But really the biggest and most vivid day for me was the day that, so Lily had a exploratory bowel surgery that was like dire, and we said goodbye to her beforehand, and she made it through that. And then she was on high frequency oscillating ventilation, and we yet again had to say goodbye to her, and all of these things kept happening, and she pulled through, and it was amazing. And we got to 100 days and we thought we were out of the woods. And on Thanksgiving 2 years ago, she contracted a staph infection, like antibiotic susceptible staph. And she was within an inch of her life. It was horrible. And we had been there for 100 days already. And we were so ready to go home. And she was still intubated. And she contracted this infection. Throughout her time, we would try to extubate her. We would try to take her breathing tube out and see if she could breathe just with a nasal cannula with pressure. And in November, we were given it one last try before we talked about other options, which ultimately, of course, led to her trach. So she was extubated, and they think that upon reintubation, she contracted this infection. And so she was already very vulnerable because she had been breathing on her own. And they didn't know for several days whether or not she would respond to antibiotics, like whether it was MRSA or antibiotic susceptible. And I was running on autopilot for so long. She got through these big, horrible milestones, and we thought, like, we have to be out of the woods by now. We became comfortable. Pat and I both woke up and like realized where the hell we were and how horrible this was. Yeah. And so instead of being on autopilot, I could feel every feeling. And I understood the gravity this time, that if we had lost her, what that meant. Before that, I just was like, okay, whatever we have to do to get through this.
Yeah.
And this time just hit me like a ton of bricks. And I remember screaming, crying on the floor of an empty bed space across from her while they struggled to ventilate her. She was satting in like the 40s and blue, and the back of her throat was white. And there were like 6 people in her bed space. And it was 100 days. Like I couldn't imagine that this was going to happen again. Yeah. And she had a really, really rough, like 4 or 5 days, those kinds of days where I called every hour to see how she was doing when we weren't there. We were there for, 12 to 14 hours, but our care team took such great care of us and told us we need to go home, we need to get sleep, we need to eat something. Yeah. And so when we would take turns calling every hour just to see how she was. They finally nailed down exactly what infection she had and the correct antibiotics to give her, and she responded and she rebounded.
Wow.
And that day has stuck with me so intensely to this day.
What was that like to find out that they found the cure or to how to help her?
I honestly don't even remember. I was so fixated on the fact that she was going to die like my other kid, and she was, and how could I have become complacent? And I should have known this was coming. There were several signs in the days leading up to it. My mom gut was alarming and I didn't listen to it. And I finally did listen to it. And one of our providers told me I was overreacting. Oh. And he ended up being very sick. I just, I was so fixated on all of the things that were going wrong that I couldn't even tell you when things turned and started going right. I couldn't even tell you what that was like. I don't know.
Yeah, that's totally valid. I think it's just such a survival mode. There's just so much. There's so much. And especially for your first time being a parent. So I had a typical child first, and then I had Kimball. So I can imagine all of the new parent, like, overwhelm and chaos combined on top of the medical stuff. We both don't know any different. But what was that like to be thrown into that for your first time as a parent?
I think it's so funny because so many of our friends that have typical kids are fixated on rashes and temperatures of 100. And I have spreadsheets of data of hourly stats from when my kid came home. Like, I don't mean to, but I laugh at them sometimes because I haven't learned what it means to be a parent until probably in the last 6 months. Right. I can take a basal body temperature like it's nobody, you know what I can do medical cares. I can change a trach with my eyes closed, but ask me to swaddle a newborn and I don't know that I could, we just took on this role of medical parent, and regular parenting is like a completely foreign thing, especially like Pat and I talk about having another kid. Right. What does it mean to feed your child? I have no idea. Like I pumped around the clock for Lily and we just fed her through her NG and then eventually her G. Like, I don't know how frequently a kid needs to eat. I don't know, what breastfeeding is like. Yeah. I don't know. Just, there are so many parenting things that we didn't get to experience. But I look forward to eventually experiencing them, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, you must have read my notes. That is the next question going into the future, because I was looking through your Instagram account and I saw that you put on there infertility as one of your like little words to describe yourself. Yes. So I'd love to know, what does your future look like to you? Is it full of hope? Is it full of fear? What does that look like for you?
It's definitely a mixed bag. We intend to have other children, whether that is biologically, through surrogacy, through adoption. We're not really sure, but I've talked a lot with my therapist, and Pat and I have talked a lot together, and I feel very sure that I need to try again. So I have polycystic ovarian syndrome. Okay. So we had to kind of go the fertility treatment route the first time. That will have to look a little bit different this next time. I used a combination of several different ovulation induction medications, which yielded twins. And we now know that my body can't physically handle twins. So if I were to get pregnant again, and it ended up being multiples, we would have to selectively reduce. Wow. do we want to jump right to IVF so that we don't have to do that and only implant one embryo? And then what happens if it doesn't take? Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, totally.
And then once I become pregnant, I have to have like a whole blood clotting protocol thing, because the ultimate reason for A's death and Lily's premature birth was two, at the time, undiagnosed blood clotting disorders. So I have to take daily Lovenox injections and baby aspirin and progesterone and all sorts of other stuff. So getting pregnant will be difficult. Staying pregnant will be difficult. So we kind of have our work cut out for us.
Yeah. And then add that on top of all the care that Lily needs. And
Yeah.
just being a mom on top of
Yes.
all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to be really daunting. Do you?
It is.
What other emotions are tangled up in there?
I mean, I think there's definitely an air of excitement because I would love to give Lily a living sibling. Her sister will be a part of her story and, you know, woven into our family forever. But I feel very strongly that she needs somebody else physically here with her. And again, whether, you know, it's foster and adoption or whatever, she's meant to be a sister to a living child. Yeah. So we're going to do it. How it gets done, who knows, but that's the plan.
Do you feel like, I know it's a complicated thing, but do you feel like your number one motivation in having another child is for Lily?
I think it is equally as much to prove to myself that I can do it. The week that I was still inpatient after Lily was born, I mean, my kid had died, my other kid was dying, and the first thing I talked to Pat about was like, we have to do this again. I have to do this again. I need to know that I can do this. So, I mean, it's definitely for Lily. It's definitely just to complete our family. But it's also, God, future kid, when you hear this, I'm sorry, but it's to prove to myself that I can do it.
So when you say, so you can do it, do you mean like giving birth again? Do you mean going full term?
Carrying, hopefully to term. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I had a C-section with the girls. I'm not one for attempting a VBAC, so I will have a C-section again, which is fine. But I need to know that I can maintain a pregnancy. I can go as close to term. For me, I think they're going to induce at 32 weeks regardless. So that'll be my full term.
But that's further. That's so much further.
Yeah.
Those are significant weeks.
Exactly. So, I mean, and so many of our physicians, you know, told us stories of parents who spontaneously got pregnant after having a child because your fertility changes, and we don't know, you know, we don't know what that looks like. So how amazing would it be if I could just naturally produce a singleton and, you know, and carry it for a long time.
So do you, when you say you want to prove it to yourself, I hold a lot of guilt for my son's different medical things. And I'm a carrier for what he has. So it's a little different, but I know that that's a common thing among, you know, special needs parents. Like, I gave this to my child. In your case, do you feel like you have guilt for what your body?
1,000%. Yes. Okay. When we received the results of A's autopsy and microarray, she was perfect. What failed her was my body. And I mean, Lily too. Lily is trached, and Lily has all of these complications from prematurity because I could not keep her safe. And I, on a good day, know that it wasn't my fault. You know, just, I'm sure it's you know, but that feeling will live inside of me forever.
Yeah, totally. And I relate with that so hard. Like, I just released an episode as we're recording this. This will be released in the future. But people have responded to me well meant and saying, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You created this awesome baby. And I'm like, I know I've attempted to wrap my head around that, but I now have come to terms that I will always feel it as my fault. And that maybe that's
Yes.
okay to just be at peace with that terrible,
Yes.
awful feeling, you know?
Yes. Yes. Again, I mean, I've already mentioned that I'm in therapy, but like, that's a lot of what my therapist and I talk about is sitting with those negative feelings, because it sucks. I feel
Yes.
horrible, horrible, but nothing anyone is going to say is going to change my mind. So
Yeah.
if that's how I have to feel a little bit forever, then great.
Mm-hmm.
It just is, it is what it is. And my body sucked. It still sucks.
Yeah,
It's just, you know,
totally.
yeah.
Like, stupid body.
Yeah.
Well, and like, yeah, there's like the flip side too, where it's like, it also created these awesome kids that we love, but it's
Exactly.
it's this strong instinctual desire to keep our children safe. And so to feel betrayed by your body is just the worst thing ever.
Yes. Yes. I remember in the NICU hugging the isolette one day in just this like fog of like PTSD, NICU parent craziness, hugging the isolette and like thanking it for like being her womb because I couldn't do it. Like
Wow,
that
yeah.
is so indicative of like the betrayal I felt toward my own body.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
It's
Yeah.
crazy. But I needed to do what I needed to do.
Yeah. No, and it's true. It's like that is such a, like, we need to process those feelings and own them, even if they're terrible, hard, heavy things.
Sure.
Just like your grief for A.
Yes.
You know, where that's a really special bond that you have with her.
Yeah. Yeah. It took a really long time for me, us, Pat, and I to even like acknowledge her death and process it. And we were just in such like a constant state of crisis with all of Lily's medical needs that it really was a good 18 months after the girls were born that we were able to start processing, which was only 6 months ago.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's pretty recent.
Yeah.
Wow. How does your grief for your daughter, A, how does that play off of your love and your relationship with Lily?
I think everything is kind of met with this bittersweet emotion, right? I saw Lily take her first steps and it was one of the most joyful moments of my life. But there's always in the back of my mind this just twinge of pain that there should be two of them taking their first steps. And even just in the everyday kind of mundane, like today, I laid out butcher paper on our coffee table and Lily was like scribbling away and just talking to herself. And I sat there thinking like she should be talking to her sister right now. And while I love watching every single thing that this kid does, there will always be just that little voice in my head saying like, well, there should be two of them. So kind of walking that every day has, you know, it's good days and bad. Like there are days where I can feel more love and joy and thankfulness. And there are days where I just want to crawl into a hole. But I think those are sentiments that most grieving parents have. So
yeah, totally. And then to combine that with the guilt of like feeling that the weight on yourself.
For sure.
Probably so heavy.
It is, but it's also motivating to do what I can to make Lily the best that she can be, because she is living for two.
Yeah. I love that. That's so beautiful.
Thanks. I mean, we have to find a way to rationalize this, you know, because it's awful. No one should lose a child. So we do what we can to not make it hurt so much every day. So
yeah. As a wrap-up question, if you could go back in time and give yourself a little bit of prep, like a little pep talk to yourself, maybe a week before you found out A had died and you started the whole, this whole journey, what would you tell yourself?
I guess I would tell myself that I will do and have done everything that I felt was right in the moment for my kid. There were times I didn't advocate for a specific treatment, or I didn't ask for an alternative steroid, or, I didn't investigate and uncover every stone. And I hold a lot of guilt. Sometimes at night I sit up and just kind of perseverate on these things that could have gone differently if I had done X, Y, or Z. And in the moment, I did what I could for my kid and what was best for my kid. And I would tell myself that I deserve a little bit of grace in that. And to not be as hard on myself as I classically have been forever, because this is uncharted territory and no one knows how they're going to react in this just deep state of crisis. And I did what I could.
Yeah, I think that's such a beautiful place to be, where you know that you did what you could, that love you have for your child is what you need. And that even though we make mistakes, but it's like, that's what they need, is just our best.
Yes. I felt for so long that as her best advocate and as the person who knows her medically, developmentally, emotionally better than anyone else, that all of that decision making, the weight of those decisions were solely on me. But I was part of a team. I was part of a physician team. I was part of a family team. And it didn't have to always be my burden to carry. And I put a lot of onus on myself to make those decisions, or to go home and read this article or skim through this medical journal on, they talked about this topic that day, and go back with my list of questions. I didn't have to be a pseudo physician to prove that I needed my kid to live. So
yeah. Like, you are still capable of taking care of her without the pseudo physician position.
Yes.
Yeah, I really love that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jess. Our conversations have really resonated with me, and I really appreciate your opening up and sharing these really personal things.
It's my pleasure. I'm so happy that we got to do this together.
You can follow Jess at Lily's Little Lungs for adorable photos of Lily and more real talk from Jess. You can also follow me at the_rare_life for updates as episodes are released. Join us next week for Jess's special topic episode, a fantastic one about the hugely positive force that social media can have in our lives as special needs parents. See you then.